Welcome to the Daily Word Verse by Verse. Grab your Bibles and follow along as we study the book of Romans. Keep in mind, I am using the Holman Christian Standard Bible. So if you're using a different translation, the read is different, but the message is the same. And also, don't forget that these studies are uploaded to the BP Bible Perspective YouTube channel. So you can catch up on all of the old lessons and studies, as well as all of the books that we have and will be studying. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. All right, so we left off. We're going to pick it up at verse 14. And I want to read just one more time, verse 11, and bring us up because it had a lot to do with what's going on in this chapter. He said, verse 11, "For though her sons had not been yet born, or done any good or bad, so that God's purpose according to election might stand," and this word election means chosen, "not from works, but from the one who called, she was told," meaning Rebekah. The story is about Rebekah and when the twins were in her womb, and this is what he said, "the older will serve the younger." So God makes this call. This has nothing to do with salvation, and that's the point I wanted to kind of re-emphasize, that it has nothing to do with salvation. People have made it about salvation, but it has nothing to do about salvation. So then he says, verse 13, "As it is written, I've loved Jacob, but I've hated Esau." Now again, some see this as God rejecting Esau in terms of eternal damnation. That is not what is talked about right here. One of the most interesting things, if you go back and you read the Genesis account, Esau hated his brother Jacob for swindling the birthright and then deceiving his father, who pronounced the blessing on Jacob when Esau, as the older, should have gotten the blessing. But God had already made the call some 40 years earlier. But Esau hated, and the reason why, because Esau was a trifling person. He was a scoundrel, and that's why God hated him. But what's interesting that you read in the book of Genesis, over the next 20 years, he mellowed out and actually became Esau and Jacob became close in their later years. That they became brothers and they embraced each other. Now, so that's, again, the reason why I'm saying that is that God, this is not saying that God rejected Esau in the terms of eternal salvation versus eternal damnation. What he's talking about here is that God rejected Esau for his purpose and brought Jacob in, and so that Christ would come through the bloodline of Jacob. Now that was a matter of just God choosing. He said, "I'm choosing this." All right, so verse 14 says, "What shall we say then? Is there injustice with God? Absolutely not. For he tells Moses, I will show mercy to whom I will show mercy. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." So it does not depend upon human will or effort, but on God who shows mercy. Now, they asked a question. I'm going to go into my Bible. I'm having trouble with my computer here. He asked a question about, is there injustice with God? Why is he asking this? Well, the statement he just made when he says, "Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated." So he's saying, is God unjust for that reason? Okay? Is God unjust for that reason? So now he says, "I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy." Now it's going to kind of get into something else. Verse 16, again, so then it does not depend upon human will or effort, but on God who shows mercy. For the scripture says, "For this reason I've raised you up, so that I may display my power in you, that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth." Now, I missed something right here. Let me go back. Verse 14, let me read it again because I think I missed something. Verse 14 says, "What shall we say then? Is there injustice with God? Absolutely not. For he tells Moses," okay, that's what I want to bring back out, I will show mercy to whom I will show mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So then it does not depend upon human will or effort, but on God who shows mercy. For the scripture tells Pharaoh, for this reason I raised you up, so that I may display my power in you, that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth. So then he shows mercy to whom he wills, and he hardens whom he wills. Again, he's talking about salvation. Now he talks about Moses right here. And he is talking about the incident when God sends Moses to Pharaoh to say, let my people go. Now again, he makes the call before even Moses goes. He said, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. Now you may go, remember his question, is God unfair for doing this? And by the way, he's going to explain these actions. Not justify them, but explain them. First, you have to understand, he says, I will show mercy whom I will show mercy. Now, you are never owed mercy. In other words, you don't have a right to mercy. No one has to show you that. So God doesn't owe you that. You're wrong before God. So God doesn't have to show you mercy. So you start with this point. So you go back to the original statement. I love Jacob, hate Esau. Now he's going to go into using the illustration about Moses. Moses and Pharaoh. God tells Pharaoh, let my people go. And Pharaoh arrogantly says no to God. So God says, okay, I'm going to harden you, and I'm going to show my power in you. So this is confusing the people because, and I'm going to tell you why people get confused. Because you're not keeping this in the context in which Paul is talking or discussing here. So go back again when he says purpose. What is purpose? Well, God's purpose was Jacob would be the head of the family. Thus, for God's purpose, Christ would come through Jacob. Right? This is the purpose. A humble person before God will say, that's God's call, I humble myself. So now he comes down and says, is God unjust for this? He says, no. He says, I can show mercy on whomever I want to show mercy. So we kind of go back. Remember, man is guilty before God. Our starting point is we're guilty. That's where we start. You don't start from any moral superiority, any moral platform. You're guilty. That's where you start from. So God doesn't have to show you mercy. That's his point. He doesn't have to show you any mercy. You're guilty. The fact that he shows mercy is good for you, but he doesn't have to. So now he comes to Moses. I'm going to use Pharaoh. I'm going to use Pharaoh's wickedness. I'm going to show my wrath in Pharaoh. So that's his point. Purpose. So now Pharaoh becomes a purpose, an instrument for God. Says, I'm going to show my wrath. Why? Because Pharaoh was wrong. But if you go back to the story, God gives Pharaoh the chance to choose. Right? He says, Pharaoh, let my people go. If you don't let my people go, you're going to get plagued. So the question now becomes, well, why didn't Pharaoh let the people go? Now watch this. Pharaoh didn't. So then in verse 18 he says, so then he shows mercy to whom he wills, and he hardens whom he wills. He hardens. That's God's choice. It's God's prerogative. Now, I'm going to pick it up in verse 19 in the next video because we're going to go further into this. All right, in verse 19, I'll see you in the next video.